Okay.
Okay.
So it's
In the
over to
meanwhile,
you,
Doctor.
Dr. Sarabjit sir.
Yeah.
Sanjeev.
Yeah, Dr. Sarabjit, you may continue with. I just wanted to introduce our audience or our participants to you. Actually, we are having about 150 participants in this group, and
Okay.
70 or you can say 80 students are from UIT University, belonging from CSE as well as IT branch, and
Okay.
rest of the participants are from CCET Diploma Wing and GPW Sector 10. That is the Government College for Women.
Hello.
Hello.
Hanji. Can the audience hear me?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
But the problem with me is I am not able to, share the screen of my laptop with the audience. That button is not enabled still.
Sir, I had given you the access. I'll give it again.
Okay.
Now, sir.
Yes. Yes. Now the option is there.
Okay, sir.
So I think now the participant can see the screen, see the presentation, object-oriented programming.
No, sir, it is not visible on the screen.
Okay.
Yes, sir, it is visible now.
It is visible now. Okay. So I think there are certain issues. I am not able to, make it run full screen. It is flickering actually.
Dr. Sarabjit, it is very much visible in this mode also. Yeah.
But on my laptop, it is flickering actually.
Okay. Must be network issue.
Or what I can do, rather than sharing the presentation, I will share the whole screen. I think that may be better.
Yes.
So is the screen visible now?
Yes, yes.
Yes, very much visible.
Okay, so we will start. So a very good morning to all the participants who are in this program. And as you already know that our today's topic is classes, which basically belongs to the concepts of object-oriented programming. And tomorrow also we have to talk about inheritance. So the thing is that with this lecture onwards, you will be starting with object-oriented programming. So the fundamentals of object-oriented programming must be very clear to you. So that's why in the initial 15-20 minutes, we'll go through the fundamentals of programming. What is procedure-oriented programming or structure-oriented programming? Then how we shifted to object-oriented programming, what was the reason? So we will go through these concepts first in the initial 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will start the practical session wherein we will create classes. So we learn about the syntax, how classes can be created, how attributes or properties within the classes can be defined, how methods can be written within the classes. So we'll go through all those concepts, but first let's begin with the fundamentals first. So see, you might have heard these names: machine language or assembly language, procedure-oriented language, or object-oriented programming language. Now, this slide is showing you the history of these languages. Initially, we begin with the machine language. Then we shifted to assembly language, then procedure-oriented or structure-oriented language came into the picture, and then, object-oriented programming also emerged. So let's understand the characteristic of these languages. See, machine language is the language that is very close to the hardware. That means to say it is very efficient, but not user-friendly. You have to write program in the form of 0 and 1s only. And there are special hardware kits via which this kind of programming is done. So this is the first kind of programming language, machine language. So here you need to consider two things. One is the hardware, and second is the user. This is the language that is very close to the hardware, but not very user friendly. It is difficult to write programs in a machine language. So it was very natural that we have to evolve certain other means. And in that case, the result was assembly language. Means from machine language to then we shifted to assembly language. Assembly language, we just not simply use 0 and 1 or exactly 0 and 1s, but in assembly language, we started using certain mnemonics. Mnemonics like, certain words like add or sum or multiply to store the results. So these kind of things we started using in assembly level language. So that means it was one step closer to the user. But again, in assembly language, you cannot do certain things very in a very user friendly way. Like you cannot declare variables straight away. You cannot define functions. You cannot straight away use pointers. So these kinds of problems were there. So that means we needed, one step more towards the user friendliness. And in that case, the result was a procedure-oriented programming. So if we see this transition, machine language to assembly language and to procedure-oriented, see, we are becoming more and more user-friendly. But we are also, taking ourselves away from the hardware. So when I say that we are taking ourselves away from the hardware, that means to say your programs are not, getting efficient now. So if I comment on the efficiency, then in this case, machine language is most efficient. It will give you the maximum performance. Why? Because it is close to the hardware. But if we compare machine language with procedure-oriented programming, then obviously procedure-oriented programming is more user-friendly, but it will not give you that performance that a machine language can give you. Now, when we were doing procedure-oriented or structure-oriented programming, okay, we wrote many programs in 90s, 70s or 80s, and again we started facing a problem, and that problem was regarding the complexity of the programs. So when you have to deal with the bigger applications, when you have to deal with the complex applications, then we get certain kind of limitations from the procedure-oriented programming language sides. And again, at that time also there was a need for the a new style of programming, new programming paradigm, and that's why this object-oriented programming then emerged in that time. So we can say that object-oriented programming is a kind of style of programming, or it is a particular type of programming. The programs are organized in a specific way, in a particular way. Like in machine language, you do programming in the form of 0 and 1. In assembly language, you started using mnemonics. In procedure-oriented programming, you got the features like declaration of variables and functions, and you have the ability to create functions and to call functions, and the solution of the problem was visualized in terms of functions. The functions were communicating with each other. But in object-oriented programming, because it's a specific type of style of programming, you need to think about the solution of a problem in terms of objects. So the concept of object emerged. So see the name, object-oriented. Orientation is towards the objects. Object is the main thing. So in order to understand object-oriented programming itself, you must be very clear about the concept of object. Which things we are saying are the objects? What do we mean by objects? So when you start looking towards the solution of a problem in terms of objects, and objects communicating with each other, if you are doing programming in that way, if you are looking towards the solution of the problem in that way, then that means that now you are dealing with, now you are going ahead with object-oriented programming. So these were the basics basically. Now this is how we look at the problem of a solution in procedure-oriented programming. Now, the basic characteristic of procedure-oriented programming is that here we visualize the solution in the form of different functions. I think you all know, all the participants in this program already know what is a function. See, function is a set of statements that perform a specific task, that perform a particular task. So in procedure-oriented programming, you write different functions, and those functions have the provisions to call each other, and you look toward the solution in terms of these kinds of functions, where one function is calling another function, and this is how you are achieving the whole functionality. This is how you are achieving the solution towards a bigger problem. So here you can see in the main program, we are calling function 1, function 2, function 3, and then function 2 can further call function 4 and 5. Function 3 can also call function 5. So this is how the solution of a program is organized. Multiple functions calling each other. And here we are not specifically talking about the data. So you can see in this diagram, the data is not given any attention. The entity in attention is the function only. Functions are calling each other. And see, if some type of data needs to be shared among different functions, then we have to declare that globally. And when we declare that data globally, each and every function get the access to get to that data, and the problem of security arises. So give me 1 second. Actually, I'm not able to annotate this screen because this taskbar is not moving. So let me make few adjustments first so that I can annotate on the screen. Yes. So what I was saying, that in procedure-oriented programming, if these functions have to act on a common data, then that data needs to be declared in the environment itself. So here we would be declaring the Now, when you declare the data in the environment itself, in terms of global variables, then those global variables become visible to all. So now see, we want the access of this global variable to be restricted to function 3 only. So that thing is not possible in procedure-oriented programming. When you make data global, automatically it becomes visible to all. So in that sense, we say the data is not secure. The security is not being provided by the procedure-oriented programming language, and that was the reason, another style of programming, another kind of, another way of writing program was required, and this is how the object-oriented programming, the concepts of OOPS emerged. So this is the same thing that I explained you in the previous, slide. That global data, if you declare the data in the environment itself, that data becomes the global and it becomes accessible to all the function, irrespective, whether that function needs the access to that data or not. This was the main problem with the procedure-oriented programming. It is not giving you any security towards the data. Now look at the organization of data and functions in object-oriented programming. You need to make a comparison between this figure where we are looking towards the solution of a problem in terms of functions calling each other, and this function. So here also, the communication is happening, but communication is happening between the objects. So you can see the objects are communicating with each other. That's why the name is object-oriented programming. Our main focus is on the object. We will see what do we mean by objects, and what do objects consist of? See, objects are consisting of two things. Number one is the data, on which that object is acting, and number two is the functions which manipulate that data. So what we are doing in object-oriented programming, we are basically, combining, we are wrapping, we are making a unit of data and functions. So this is the main concept in object-oriented programming, and technically we say this is encapsulation, basically the wrapping up of the data and the function inside a single unit. And later on we will see this unit is also called class. Class basically, is a provision given to you by the programming language to create objects. And you are looking towards the solution of a problem not in terms of just functions, but in terms of different objects that are communicating with each other. Just as an example, consider that you are given the task to automate the process of an institution, or you are given the task to automate the functioning of a university. Now see, when you look towards the solution of this problem, you are given the task to automate the functionality of a university. So first you need to understand what kind of functionality is being provided by the university. Now, university admits students, university take fees from the students, then students are sent to different classes wherein faculty teaches those students appear in examinations, then on the basis of results of the examinations, the result of the students is declared according to the marks they are getting. Students are also taking hostel facilities. So you see, if you try to understand the whole university environment, it is very complex. So many entities are participating in this university problem. Like faculty is there, student is there, courses are there, subjects are there, fees is there, hostels are there, maybe parking spaces are also there. And then there are different levels of courses, bachelor level courses and the master level courses. So the system is very complex. So many entities are communicating with each other. So in this case, if you are dealing with this kind of problem and you are trying to visualize the solution in terms of these functions, and functions will make call to each other to give you the whole functionality, to give you the functionality of the overall university system, then you will see later on you will encounter many problems. It is very difficult to design such kind of function. You may be able to design the functions, but you know, again, if problem arises, if later on you need to make certain changes, then it will be very tough for you. The understanding of the code is very difficult. So to handle such kind of things, you know, procedure oriented programming is not suitable. Rather, you need to use the concepts of object oriented programming. And here we treat each and every, you know, entity as a different. For example, when we are saying, okay, in university system, there is a, you know, faculty, there are students, there are courses, there are hostels, there is a, you know, account department which charges you the fee. So you can consider each of these things as different objects. For example, student can be one object, or faculty can be another object, or department can be another object. So you look towards the solution of a problem in terms of consisting of different objects, where objects, you know, communicate with each other to provide you the solution to a bigger problem. So this is how you know, we look at the solution of a problem in object oriented programming, and this is the concept of objects basically. And class, again, I am saying that class is a provision given to you by the programming language to create those objects. We will see the definition of class also. We will define class as a blueprint for the objects. Now objects. So objects are the basic runtime entities. So this thing is important. Runtime entities in an object-oriented system. See, objects will actually come into the picture when you will be running the program. At runtime, you know, memory will be allocated to the objects and they will come into the picture. Before that, you will just specify the blueprint of the object. And in order to specify that blueprint of the object, you will be using a feature called class. So class actually is a keyword in most of the programming languages, and using the feature of class, this keyword, you would be creating objects. So next, what we are saying is that objects are representative of real world entities. Real world entities. Again, if you go to the previous slides, student is a real world entity. We understand the concept of student. Okay, if we're saying student means that person is taking education over there. Students are having roll number, they are having name. We need to record their addresses. They are going through certain courses. We need to, you know, record their marks also. So the concept of students is there in our mind. Then we also know what is a faculty. Okay, faculty is someone who is teaching. Faculty may be expert in something. He has some specialization. He may be, you know, teaching one class or more than one classes. Similarly, the department may be offering certain courses. So see, these objects are real world entities, because ultimately you are looking towards the solution of a bigger problem, a complex problem. So our you know, general intuition is, okay, like when the human brain also see at something, then you know, we think, okay, certain entities are communicating with each other. So this concept of object oriented programming, you know, enable us, you know, visualize the solution in that way. Okay, so the objects are real world entities and represent the things like a person, a bank account, an instrument, a place, anything. See, I can be an entity, you can be an entity, this laptop can be an entity, this room can be an entity. So for anything for which you can assume certain attributes, for which you can, you know, identify certain attributes or characteristics, that thing can be taken as an object. Now we'll come to the concept of classes. What is a class? Now, a class is a user-defined blueprint. So try to understand these things first. Class is user-defined. We will be defining the, you know, structure of the class. Why? Because when I say I have to create a student object, I would be mentioning, okay, for me, you know, student is some entity that has roll number, name, address, date of birth, courses, marks. And functions, I want to, you know, manipulate student data in the way, okay, admit new student, okay, promote student to this class, okay, issue certain books to that student, or take the fee from the students. So like that. So I need to specify those things, okay, from my side. So that in that way, a class is user defined. Most of the time, you would be the designer of the solution would be, you know, specifying what is the structure of the class. So it is user defined and it is acting as a blueprint. Blueprinting means you are just mentioning, okay, the structure, the makeup of the your class, and later on you would be creating the objects. So it's a user-defined blueprint or prototype from which individual objects are created. Now, student is a general term. But when I talk about, okay, let's say Amit is a student, or Vishal is a student. Now I am talking about the specific instances of this student. Specific, I am becoming more concrete. So from here you can understand the concept of classes and object like this. So student is a class, and Amit and Vishal are the objects of this class, the student class. So classes represent the set of properties or attributes or methods or functions that are common to all objects of one type. So you also need to understand the difference between the properties and the attributes and the methods and the function. So again, if we go to the previous slide, so there also we mentioned that our class consists of two things. One is the data and second is the function. The data is also called the attribute or property. These functions are also known as methods. So you need to mention two things in the class: the attributes or the properties by declaring certain variables that will be the data for us, and by declaring certain functions or methods which will act on that data. And objects are the variable of type class. For example, if I write student Amit, you compare it with this statement, integer I. You might have used this in C. So integer is the data type, I is the variable. So similarly, when I write student Amit is a kind of variable, but is a special variable called the class variable or the object, and student is the class. So classes and objects are the basic concepts in object-oriented programming, and which revolve around the real life entities. So that's why the understanding of the concept of classes and objects is very, very important and fundamental for us to proceed further in this area in object-oriented analysis and design. So now we can define object-oriented programming. So object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm based on the concept of objects, which contain data in the form of fields, also known as the attributes or the properties, and the code in the form of procedure known as the methods. So you always look at object in your mind in this way, consisting of certain data elements and consisting of certain functions. So whenever we deal with object-oriented systems, we make use of certain technical terms, or there is a specific terminology associated with object-oriented programming. So these terms must be clear to you: encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism. But let's first start with encapsulation. What do we mean by encapsulation? We have already defined the encapsulation, but let's study it once again. The wrapping up of data and functions into a single unit. So this thing wherein you are combining data and function inside a unit. This concept wherein you are binding and data, this concept is known as encapsulation. And it supports data hiding, provides us the security, because using this we can insulate the data from the direct access. So from the environment side, if you have to access the data, you cannot directly access the data. You have to access the data through functions only. So this is how we are looking towards the security aspect. And we say that object-oriented programming provide you the security. We mean to say, from the environment we cannot make direct access to data, but data needs to be accessed through functions only. And this wrapping up of data and function inside a unit is known as encapsulation. Next is abstraction. Now, abstraction refers to the act of representing essential features without including the background details. Now, in order to understand this concept, see, whenever we are creating classes, consider this very simple class, student. Now, what you would be mentioning inside this student class are the two things, the data and the functions. Data in my case would be roll number, name, address, date of birth, these kind of things. And function would be, you know, like maybe issue book, allocate hostel, give marks, these kind of things. So now see, what you are doing over here is you are representing a student, but you are not considering a specific student. Now, specific student maybe Amit, Vishal. So there may be so many, you know, specific students, but you are able to represent the concept of a student. All these are students, and all these students have roll number, name, address, date of birth. They need to be issue books. They need to be allocated hostel, or they need to go through different courses, or they need to be, you know, given certain marks. So now see, you have the ability to represent that concept, the concept of a student, using classes. And real students, actual students can be created later on via objects. So this ability, wherein you are representing certain things, you are representing the essential features of a entity of student without actually including the specific details. This process, this thing is known as abstraction. Classes themselves use the concept of abstraction. Whenever you are creating a class, that means that you are using the concept of abstraction. You are providing here the abstract form of students. The real students will come into picture later on when you will be creating objects. So these are the fundamental concepts. Now we will, with this much information, we'll proceed towards certain implementations. Now the environment I am using is this Jupyter Lab, very much similar to Jupyter Notebook. And we will be demonstrating the concept. I will be demonstrating the concept of classes over here in this environment by writing code. Okay, up till this point, any queries or doubts or questions from the audience side? I'll break for 30 seconds only. 30 seconds. You can discuss among themselves, and you can read questions, the doubts if you have. Then we will start with the implementation of these things. Yes, any question from the audience side? Anyone from the participants side need to give me some signal to proceed? No questions?
Sir, all the students are active in chat box. You can view their responses in chat box.
Okay. I need to see where is the chat box. Okay. So one questions that I'm able to see is, sir, explain abstraction. Repeat the abstraction, the concept of abstraction first. Again. Okay, we'll do that. Now, I'll repeat both the concept, encapsulation as well as abstraction. Again, understand what is the makeup of a object. Now, object is consisting of two things: data and the functions that can act on that data. This concept, the ability wherein you can consider data and functions as a unit. See, otherwise data and functions are two separate things. But this ability that is provided by the programming language, wherein you can consider the data and the function as a unit, this thing is encapsulation, the wrapping up of data and functions inside a single unit. And this gives you the feature of security. So encapsulation is this thing. Now comes to the abstraction. See how we are defining abstraction. Try to understand the definition first. Act of representing essential features without including the background details. Try to understand now in these terms. So when I say that I am defining a class student, wherein the examples of data are the roll number, the student name, the marks, so many things. Functions may be, okay, allocate marks to the students, allocate hostel to the students. See, what you are doing over here is you are representing the concept of a student. So when I use this term concept, this is abstraction. I don't know about a particular student. For example, let's say for IIT Delhi or for any institution, I am making use of the concept of this student class. I know wherever student will belong to whatever institute the student belongs to, student concept itself say, okay, students consist of roll number, name, date of birth, certain courses and marks, these kind of things. The concept is in your mind. Programming languages are giving you the ability to represent that concept somehow in the form of a class. This thing is abstraction. Means you have represented the essential features of what? In our case, we were able to represent the essential features of a student. When you declare the class, here in this case, when you declare the student class, and when you said that data consists of roll number, name, and functions consist of allocate marks, what you are doing, you are representing the essential features without including the background details. We don't know what are the rules of hostels. Those we have not specified yet. We don't know whether Ram would be allocated hostel or Sham would be allocated hostel. Those are different students. We don't know what would be the marks of Amit, what would be the marks of Vishal. But we have represented the concept that students have certain marks. What are the exact marks? What are the exact names? What is the name of the hostel that was allocated? What was the exact percentage that the student obtained? Those background details we need not specify initially. So understand these things. You are representing student in an abstract way. You are just representing the concept of a student. You are not becoming specific about the name of a student, exact marks of the students, exact fees paid by the students, exact name of the hostel. Those are the background details. Those we will think later on when we would be writing, when we would be creating objects, and when we will be making communication between those objects. So I think with this explanation, the concept of abstraction and encapsulation would be clear to you. I need your comments to proceed. Okay, thank you. So I think now this screen is visible to everyone. Now, see, you need to understand one thing, that in Python, everything is object. Let's do a small experiment first. If I write print type 100, let's see what is the output that we are getting. Try to understand. It is saying the type of this thing, which is 100, which is integer, type of this integer value is class. And what is the name of the class? Integer. And what I wanted to show you in this case is that everything in Python is a object. There is, a class to which that, objects belongs to in Python. For example, in this case, that 100, which was an integer value, that is also an object, belongs to the class integer. You can check for other things also. Print type. See, type function gives you the type of that variable, the type of the data, what kind of data that is, whether that is a class or something else. So when I say type, let's say 88.8, and if you will run it, see, this is also a class, but what is the name of the class now? Float. One more example. Print type hello all. You run it. Again, what you are getting is a class. Type of the class is string. Print type. Now, what is the meaning of this thing? I think you might have studied in the previous lectures that what is this? This is basically a tuple. And when I, let's say, if I execute this. See, this tuple, these brackets represents a tuple. So this tuple is also a class. And if I represent these tuples with square brackets, and you might have studied about these square brackets. This is basically a list. So you will see this is a list, and that list is also a class. And I'm sure that you might have talked about this dictionary also, dictionary data type also. And if I execute this thing, so here also you will see that this is a dictionary class. This thing. So what I tried to show you is that behind the scenes in Python, everything is object, and that object belongs to some class. Now, at the root level, this Python system has a class with the name object. So everything is actually getting derived from the object class. Everything is object in Python programming language. So this is what we tried to demonstrate. Now, let's try to let's create a class now because we understood the concept of classes. So what we would be doing now, we will create a blank class. This is the simplest type of class that you can create in Python. Now, class. Now consider that you are working for a gaming company, and that gaming company assigned you the task to create a game. Now, when you are given the task to create a game, obviously, if you are using object-oriented concepts, you have to think each and everything in terms of objects. Now in that game, you will think about certain objects. What kind of objects will communicate with each other in that game? And one very fundamental entity, one very fundamental character in that game is going to be the player itself, isn't it? Because if you are designing a game, if you are writing a software to create a game, obviously that game would be played by someone, a player. So now in this case, in this situation, you need to look towards the player in terms of a class, an object. So we will take this as an example, and our future examples will also consider this is a class. So let's try to create that class. Let's try to model this class, this character, a player character. So in that way, I will say take the name of my class as a player character. I once again, repeat the sense, the concept of this class, because every class has a concept behind it. Student, you all know what is a student. Employee, you all know. You know the concept of employee. You know the concept of department. You know the concept of university. So many things. And by player character, we mean an entity, someone who will play that game. That's why we are designing this class, because why we are working for a gaming company, and that gaming company has assigned us the task to create a game. And when I'm looking towards the solution of that game, I have to model different entities in an object-oriented way. And one of the very fundamental entities is the player itself. And for that, I am designing this class, player character. Now, initially, I will not keep anything in that class. It is going to be a blank class. Why? Because we are demonstrating a blank class. So you must know how to create a blank class. A blank class is a class which will not be having any attributes or properties, which will not be having any functions or the methods. So if you want to create that kind of class, you will simply write class player character colon, and then you will write pass, and that's it. So here in this case, you have declared the blank class name player character. So if you want to give me to give it a diagrammatical representation, then it would be like this. That I have created a class player character, but data and functions are nothing. I have not mentioned any data, any function inside that class. It is simply a player character class. This is what we declared over here. Class player character, pass, that's one. Next, now here we can create individual objects for this class. For example, let's say Robin equal to player character. Now try to understand what we are mentioning over here, that Robin is a specific instance of the class. Robin is an object of the class. Of which class? Of player character class. So that means to say, this is a, what is this? This was a blueprint. Now we created an actual object, and the name is Robin. Robin is having this kind of structure. So this is how you can create objects in Python. Robin is equal to player character, and that's it. Now, if I execute this statement, print type Robin, what type this Robin is, let's execute. You'll say that it is a class. This Robin belongs to class. Which class? Player character, which we have created. So this was a very simple demonstration of creating a class, blank class, which is not having any function, which is not having any data also. Still we can create one object. We created one object Robin of type player character, and when we displayed the type of that object, the system showed us that this is a player character class. Now second, what we can do, we can have certain attributes and data for this class. Now say we will not keep them blank. Let's have a data first, and let that data be sorry, the name, because our player character must have a name. Because if you are visualizing in terms of objects, obviously you must identify certain data, and one of the very fundamental type of data is the name. Your player character must have a name. So let's model that. Now, when you were modeling that, here you need to mention, when you are declaring a player character class, now what you will be writing, def underscore init underscore bracket start self comma name. Now this thing may look very complicated to you. That what is the meaning of this? Def underscore init underscore self. What is init? What do you mean by these underscore symbols? What is the meaning of self? So let me explain a little about these things. Def means whatever I am mentioning after this is going to be a function. This thing will act as a function. Okay. So this def means this underscore init underscore is a function. Number two, this underscore init underscore is a special kind of function which we call as the dunder method or magic method. You can think of it as an equivalent to the concept of constructor in C++ or in Java. Init, the name itself says it is used to initialize the objects, to supply initial values to the objects. And in init, what we are going to mention is what we are going to give input is the self variable and the name. Name is the property or the attribute, that is the data part of the class. Self is a special word in Python that refers to the object itself. Now what do we mean by this? I'll just explain, but first let me write one more line under this function, and that is going to be self dot name is equal to name, and let me take a screenshot of this. Now see, now I'll explain what do we mean by this self. See, when you create objects, like in this statement, you created the object and the name of the object was Robin. This self refers to this Robin. Now, whenever you will try to create a new object, like in this, we created the object Robin of type player character. Implicitly, a call will be made to the init function, because this is a special function acting as a constructor and is invoked by the Python itself to supply initial values to your object. So here this self will refer to this Robin. And what kind of data we are considering for this object is the name. Later on we can mention other data elements also, like name or age or other parameter or other characteristics of the player character. But to just begin with, we have specified just one data type, just one type of data, one characteristic, and that is the name. And when we write self.name is equal to name, self means this Robin. This Robin is going to take this name. What name? This name which you will, mention in the constructor. Then you will make a call to this player character. Now, if I run this, code, I will get an error. Why? Because when I am making a call to the player character, when I am creating an object, I am not mentioning the name. But if I say player character Robin, now name of the object is Robin and the name of this character is also Robin. You can also say this is player 1 for me. And here now I need to replace this small Robin with P1. So now what you are saying is that you are creating first player, name of that player is Robin. Now this self will refer to this P1, and when this statement will get executed, self.name means this P1's name, player 1's name. And what is that name? This name, Robin. That is, this P1 will acquire some name, and that name is going to be this name, Robin. Now, if I execute this, okay, this code will run fine, and this code will show me that P1 is a class of type player character. I hope you are understanding this. So let me explain once again. If I take a full screen snap now. Now try to understand that this P1 is this self. Self.name means this P1's name, and this name is going to be this Robin. That means this P1 dot name is going to be Robin. So this is what is the meaning of this statement. Now if I write print P1 dot name and the name of my player is P1 dot name, then you will say this output. We can make this thing comment and run again. You'll say the name of my player is Robin. Why? Because now this P1 player has been assigned a name Robin. With this statement, self.name is equal to name. And I hope that this thing is clear to you, how we can create a class and how to initialize the attributes of this class player character. Now what we will be doing is we will be adding other attributes to this class player character. Now consider that we want to specify age also for our player character. So I'll mention it like this: self name comma age, and here now I would be writing self dot age is equal to this age. This age is this age, and this self dot age refers to this player 1's age. So now if I make a call to this player character class like this, P1 is equal to player 1 Robin comma 20, and let's say we are creating another object also, P2 is equal to player character big box age 21, and let's say this is an archer for us. The player 1 is an archer and player 2 is a boxer for us. And if I write the name of my player is this and age is And now if you run this, you will say the name of a player is Robin and age is this thing. We can cut these things. And similarly for player 2 also, we can display the name and age. So the name of my player is Robin, age is 20. The name of my player is Big Box and the age is 21. So this is how you can create, different kinds of objects. And let us create a, create one more function. Let's say, just as an example, definition run self. Now you need to note over here is whenever you are creating functions that belongs to a class, you must pass self to that function. Why? Because later on you are going to invoke this function with the help of an object, and that object needs to be passed. So this self will refers to the object with which you are calling this function. So it is very important for you to understand this concept. Whatever function you will create inside the class, you must mention self as the first parameter. Now, because we are just representing the concept that our player character has the ability to run, so I'll simply write this code inside this function, run print, let's say self dot name runs /n. Clear? So means now I have the ability to call these functions also, this function also run. For example, when I say p1 dot run, see what I am doing is I am invoking this run function with the help of object p1. So p1 dot run will make this function execute run, and which statement would be executed? Self dot name runs, and self dot name, if you are calling it with p1, p1's name is Robin, it will print Robin runs. But if you will call it with p2, what's going to be displayed? That Big Box runs. Now make these statements as comment, and now I will run. So you can see dot run produces this output, Robin runs, and dot run produces this thing as output, Big Box. Now if we try to visualize this class in our mind, it's like because when we started the concept of object-oriented programming, so we there we visualize the concept of object like this certain function. Now this is player character. This player character for me, and it has two attributes, name and age. This name and this age, and it has one function, run, this function, and this run is making use of this function self dot run. This run is actually making use of this variable. This whole thing is a blueprint. And when I say Robin, oh sorry, P1 is equal to this thing player character. Now this is an object for us that belongs to this blueprint. So this concept must be clear to you, that how to visualize objects in your mind. What is the meaning of class? What is the meaning of object? How objects are a blueprint of the class. Now what we will do, we will add attributes to the class. Add more attributes to the class on fly. Now later on, let's say if I say P1 dot health is equal to 100, and what we are doing over here is we are adding another attribute to the player, and that attribute is health. And if I print the health of player P1 is P1 dot health, the system will say the health of player P1 is 100. Why? Because you have assigned this attribute to player P1. What about P2? If I execute this statement like this, P2 dot health, you will see there is an error. That player character object has no attribute health. Why? Because you added this attribute health to player P1 only. P2 player character has no information about this attribute, health attribute. So if you want all your objects to have this health attribute, it needs to be passed over here to the init like this, health. But if you will be adding attributes to the objects like this, they will only belong to the objects to which you have added the attributes. They will not belong to any other object. But this may not be true, but so because we want the health attribute to be possessed by all the objects, so we'll mention it over here, and here one more line will come, and that is self dot health is equal to health. Now it will be mandatory for you to pass the health over here when you are creating the object. Now if you will run, yes, it runs fine. The health of player P1 is 100, the health of player P2 is also 100. So, but try to remember, if you add attributes like this, let's say P1 dot new attribute is equal to some value, let's say 56, then this new attribute will belong to P1 only. P2 will not possess this attribute, new attribute. If you want the attributes to be possessed by all the objects, they needs to be passed like this. So this is what I tried to demonstrate. One more function that may be of help to you is help. Let me delete all these things. If I write help P1, so you'll see you will get the blueprint for this P1. So help P1 will display this thing, help on player character. The system will automatically find out this P1 belongs to this player character, and this is in module main. This is the main object, and it consists of 3 attributes: name, age, and health, and one object run. And these are the other render methods, that automatically this object, acquired. No need to, think about these functions at this moment. But whenever you will write help someone, help some object, the system will display you the class behind that object and the structure of that class. Like in this case, this class consists of 3 variables and 1 function. So this help function may be of utility to you when you are doing programming with Python. Now we'll talk about one more concept, that is the class attribute. Now, class attributes are those attributes which are possessed by the class irrespective of the objects. So if a class possesses an attribute, indirectly that attribute is possessed by all the players as well. Now, what do we mean by that? That in our case we have name, age, health, and the run method. And P1 and P2 are the two objects which are having access to the name, age, and health. So P1 has its own name, age, and health. Similarly, P2 has its own name, age, and health. So if when we talk about class attributes, then the class attributes will not take unique values for different objects, but instead that attribute will be shared by all the objects. So it will come somewhere over here, let's say membership. So if I want to make membership as a class attributes, not the object attributes, then how we can do that is like this. We can declare that variable over here, like membership is equal to, let's say, 2. So what we have done over here is we have declared a class variable. Membership is class variable. All objects will have access to it, and any object can change it. So this is the characteristics of this attribute. But here the variables that we have created, name, age, and health, are not class attributes but instance attributes. Why? Because these attributes belongs to the instance, particular instance, P1 and P2. Now if I display membership value with the help of P1, let's say print P1 dot membership, it is going to display true. See, P1 has access to this membership. The value is true. Similarly, P2 will also be having access to this value. True. Another thing is that you can access these variables, which are class variables, with the help of class name also. Like player character dot membership, say true. So anybody can access. All objects have access to it. We have demonstrated P1 can access membership, P2 can access membership, and it can be accessed via this notation also, player character dot membership. But if I write print player character dot name, you will get an error. Why? Player character has no attribute name, because this name is an instant attribute, not the class attribute. Player character cannot access name because name is instance attribute. Player character can access membership. Why? Because membership is a class variable. So you must understand this difference. Next, if I change the value like this, P1 dot membership is equal to false. Now, what output you expect? Whether this is going to be false, 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 or true, true, true. Let's check it out. It is false for P1, but for P2 and player character, this is still true. That means this P1 couldn't manipulate this membership. Rather, another membership variable got created for P1. So this is the concept you need to understand, that what happened. I'll explain you diagrammatically. The thing was like this. We had three attributes, three instance attributes. What were those? Name, age, and health. P1 has its own name, own age, and own health. Membership was the class attribute, which was shared by P1, P2, and is accessible via player character class also. Now, when you wrote P1 dot membership is equal to false, in this case, this membership got created over here, membership. This membership got the value false, but this membership value is still true. So try to understand. When this statement gets executed, P1 dot membership false, this membership gets exclusively created for P1. There it acquired the value false. But this membership, which exists at a higher level, this is still attaining the value true. So that's why when you will print P2 dot membership, it will display true. Player character dot membership, it will also display the value true. But here the question arises: what if you want to make this value false for all the objects, whether it is P1, P2, or P3? So this thing gives us a hint that if you want to change the value of the class variable for all the objects, you need to change it with the help of class name. For example, if I change it like this, not P1 dot membership false, but player character dot membership is equal to false. And now if I run this code, you'll see it has got changed for all. class variable is changed. For P1 also it has got changed. For P2 also it has got changed. So you must be very careful while dealing with the class attribute. You must know how they behave. If you want some variable to be shared by all the objects, okay, declare it as a class variable. But if you want to make changes to that variable, then make changes with the help of the name of the class only, like this player character dot membership is equal to some new value. But don't make changes like this p1 dot membership is equal to false. Why? Because then this change will happen for P1 only. P2 and other objects, if P3 is there, P4 is also there, those will not get affected. So you must be very clear about this behavior. Next we'll talk about default values that can be taken by the constructor also. Let's do one more experiment like this. Let's create another player. P3 is equal to, let's say, player character. That's it. What will happen if I make a call to player character like this? If I create another object P3, another player P3, and simply make a call to player character, see, you will get an error. Why? Init missing 3 required positional attributes. Why? Because your init method is expecting 3 attributes: name, age, and health. You provided those values with P1 and P2, but you forgot to provide those values with P3. That's why you are getting this error. That means to say, if I specify 3 values over here in player character, P3 statement, P3 is equal to player character, those 3 variables, this statement will run fine. But what if I want to make this statement run? That means say, if I am not specifying any value, I want the class to attain default values. So those things can be mentioned like this: name is equal to anonymous, let's say over here. Age is equal to 0, health is equal to also 0. So what I have done over here is I have specified the default values to the constructor. Now if I run this statement P3, see, there is no errors. Why? How? What values are attained by P3 now for name and age and health? Now P3's name, if you will display, would be anonymous. P3's age would be 0, and P3's health will also be 0. Let's verify. If I write print P3 dot name, you didn't mention any name, but if you print P3 dot name, it will display anonymous. Why? Because this default value was taken. Similarly, if you will print P3 dot age, you are going to get 0 because that was the default value for age. So this. But yes, if you mention the values over here, let's say player 3, age is 25 and health is 90. Now if you display name and age, you are going to get P3 and 25. Why? Because now these values have been overwritten. So you must know this thing also, how you can pass default values to init, that is the constructor. Now we will use the concept of this concepts. Decorators. We'll talk about what are the decorators. Okay, any questions up till this point? Now let me give you an example of a decorator method. So they are used like this. Just as we said that our variables can be instance variables or our variables can be class variables, our methods can also be a class methods. So if you want to make a method as the class method, it needs to be written like this: @class method. So this is a decorator for my function. That means the function that I am going to specify now is a class method. So if I write def, that simply add class num1, num2, and let me simply return num1 plus num2. So when you say that this add method is a class method, that means to say it can be called irrespective of the object. For example, if I write print player character dot add 2 comma 3, see, the class itself is now able to make a call to this function add. This add is a class method, means it is not bound to a particular object, rather it can be called by the class itself. I can call this method via using p1 and p2 also. For example, if I write print p1 dot add or p2 dot add like this, see, objects are also able to make a call to this, and this class is also able to make a call to this. Why? Because this is a class method. But if you make a call to this run function, you will get an error. Why? Why? Because this run is not a class method. So right over here, run is not a class method, but this add is a class method. So you must understand the difference. If method is a class, it can be called with the name of the class and by the objects also. But if a method is not a class method, it cannot be called with the name of the class. It needs to be called via the objects. So this is what we try to demonstrate over here. Now your methods can be static method also. So if you want to declare your method as the static methods, then they would be written like this: @ static method. Let's say def sum num1 num2 return num1 plus num2. Now see, the difference between static method and class method is that when you are declaring a class method, you need to mention this thing, CLS. But when you are declaring static method, there is no need to write CLS. You can simply pass the attribute. So in case of static method, no need to pass self or class attribute. That's the only difference. And later on also you would be able to call it via class name like this. If I say print player character dot sum 5 comma 5, and let me delete these things. Player character dot sum, see, you will get the sum as 10. So sum static method, it also belongs to the class. You can call it with the name of the class. You can also call it with the objects also. See, like this, both the statements will succeed. But the difference between class method and static method is that when you are declaring static method, there is no need to pass self or CLS. But when you are declaring class method, you need to mention this class method. So this was the difference. So any doubts up till this point? It's 11:28. So we will end the session over here. In the next session, we will see how the objects of two different classes can communicate with each other, and we will also create a list of the objects also. That would be a more realistic example. But before that, you brush up your concepts of this, how we can declare a class, how attributes can be added to the class, how methods can be specified within the class, how objects can be created, and how objects can make a call to the methods as well as the
Okay. So participants, if you have any query regarding this session, you can write in the chat box. So there are two questions from the students in the chat box. If you can answer them.
Hanji, but I am not able to see that box, the text chat box.
Okay, sir, can I speak out the question, sir?
Yes, please.
Sir, Tavishi is asking, can we specify only some attributes and not all?
Can we specify some attributes and not all?
Yes, sir.
She need to elaborate these questions. Like, what do you mean by that?
So, Tavishi, please elaborate on your question. And another question is from Ekant Garg. Any other difference between class method and static method?
No, you can't. Both the methods, class method and static method, are exactly same. The only difference is that when you are declaring a class method, you need to pass CLS as the first attribute, like this. I have highlighted. But in case of static method, no need to pass self and CLS, these kinds of attributes. This is the only difference. Otherwise, the concept wise, they are exactly same. No difference between class method and static method. The concept must be clear to you that they belong to class and they can be called with the name of the class as well as with the objects also.
Okay, I think Ekant, that is clear. And another question from Kushagra. What the use of membership class variable?
Again, it depends upon what you are modeling. Now, let's say that I want to keep track of that how many objects have been created for a particular class. For example, there is a player character and I want to keep track how many player characters I have actually created, how many player objects I have actually created. Like in this example, here you can see P1, P2, P3. I have created 3 player objects. If I want to keep a track on this number programmatically, then you can declare that variable as a class variable over here. For example, if I write count is equal to 0, then what I can specify in the constructor, I can increment this value like this, player character dot count plus is equal to 1. Whenever a call is made to the init method constructor, this count would be incremented, and this count would be incremented not for that particular object. It would be incremented globally, because this count variable is now belonging to the class. So this way you can keep track of how many objects have been created for that class. So obviously utilities are there. So you must be clear as a programmer, you must be knowing that this feature is there. How to make use of that feature is up to you. So it is the provision. This is the provision that Python has made available to you. As a programmer, as a designer, it is your responsibility to exploit this feature in the way that better suits your design. Like I have mentioned one utility that this class variable can be used to keep track of the number of objects that have been created for that particular class.
Okay, so there is another question from Tavishi. When we are dependent on the default values, can we leave out attributes by choice while declaring the object of that class?
Again, I didn't understand. When we are
When we are
dependent on the
dependent
default
on the default values, can we leave out
can
attributes by choice while
attributes.
declaring the object of that class?
Again, she need to elaborate what do she mean by this.
Okay, Tavishi, please elaborate your question. Sir, another is from Nimrat. She wants to say that when you are writing self.name in constructor, but when it was called using object, it gave error. But the variable which is written using self is class variable and should be assessed by object. How did it give error?
When sir, you wrote self.name in constructor, but when it was called using object, it gave error.
Yes, yes.
When can you specify actually these candidates needs to give me that clear picture. I myself forget what was that exact situation. What was the state of different variables in which I made a call to that and it got error. But otherwise, the concept should be very clear to you that if that variable is an instance variable and if you are trying to access it with the help of an object, you should not get any error.
Okay. Sir, another is from Manan. Is self an argument?
Yes, and it is implicitly passed. It refers to the object that you are trying to create.
Okay. Okay, sir, I think we should wind up this session here now. Any queries will be taken up in the next session.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be a little faster in the next session,
Yes,
because there is one very particular real life example. I'm again linked to this concept only, player character only,
Okay.
so that will demonstrate to the candidates how the objects of different classes can communicate with each other.
Yes, yes.
So that example will make their concepts more clear about the classes.
Yes, sir. So we will start the next session at 12:30 after a break of one hour.
Clear.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you. You can leave the session now. And all the participants are requested to fill the attendance in the form shared by Ritika. And the next session will start by 12:30. So all the participants are again requested to join the meeting latest by 12:25 so that the session can be started at time. So do fill the attendance before leaving the session. So you can leave the meeting, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.